Most people think of royalty as ceremonial, castles, crowns, and charity. But one European king quietly became richer than nearly every billionaire on the continent. This is the story of power hidden in tradition, wealth protected by silence, and the richest monarch you've never heard of. To understand how one royal family got this rich, we have to start where most fortunes do, with land. When people talk about rich royalty, the first name that usually surfaces is King Vajiralongkorn of Thailand. His staggering personal wealth, estimated at over $40 billion, is locked into crown property and shares in the country's largest companies. His reign is controversial, secretive, and clouded by scandal. But Vajiralongkorn isn't European, and when it comes to Europe, the public assumes that monarchs are figureheads, symbolic, ceremonial, dressed in medals but stripped of muscle. The King Albert II of Monaco, once a tabloid regular, presides over a tax haven glittering with yachts and Formula One circuits. Yet his actual power is modest compared to his image. Or King Harald V of Norway, respected, humble, and mostly bound by parliament. Even King Philip of Belgium and King William Alexander of the Netherlands seem more like dignified diplomats than rulers. Their fortunes, at least officially, are modest, their estates inherited, their power limited. But hidden among the Alps, tucked between Switzerland and Austria, is a monarch who quietly rewrites his narrative. Prince Hans Adam II of Liechtenstein doesn't chase headlines. He doesn't host royal weddings in gold-laced cathedrals or parade through palaces with global fanfare. Instead, he controls the world's richest royal family in a country barely the size of Washington, D.C., a country most people couldn't find on a map. Liechtenstein is tiny, but its royal family is vast. Over the centuries, the House of Liechtenstein built a land empire that stretched beyond their borders. They didn't rely on conquest, they relied on purchases, marriages, and financial strategy. Their holdings reached deep into Austria and what is now the Czech Republic. They own thousands of acres of forest, dozens of castles, art collections, and wine estates. At one point, their Bohemian properties rivaled those of the Habsburgs. After World War II, some of these lands were seized under communist rule, but the family adapted. They didn't crumble, they consolidated. They moved their base to Varus, Liechtenstein's capital, and began quietly rebuilding. Not with swords or flags, but with corporate character and legal protections. Today, they still own vast forests in Lower Austria. They oversee Varus Castle, still the family's official residence, and manage dozens of historical estates through trusts. Their Vienna-based art collection, featuring Rembrandts and Rubens, is worth hundreds of millions. These are not public museums, these are family assets. But what makes the Liechtenstein model so unique is the merger of private wealth with constitutional authority. Hans Adam doesn't just own castles, he shapes the laws of his country. He isn't a mascot, he's a monarch in the literal sense, ruling, managing, and expanding. Unlike Britain's Windsors or Spain's Bourbons, whose royal wealth is often managed separately from state matters, the Liechtenstein royal portfolio and national power structure is fused. It's not just ceremonial, it's corporate, it's legal, and it's very deliberate. But this wasn't just about heritage estates. Hans Adam turned tradition into an economic engine. Hans Adam II was born into a royal family with centuries of inherited land and art. But it was what he built, not just what he inherited, that transformed the Liechtenstein name into a synonym for private wealth. The world saw a tiny alpine nation, mostly famous for postage stamps and ski slopes. Hans Adam saw something else, a vault. In the late 1980s and 1990s, when many monarchs were shrinking their roles or ceding influence to parliaments, Hans Adam leaned into power. His strategy wasn't loud, it wasn't theatrical, it was surgical. He didn't just want to maintain Liechtenstein's royal fortune, he wanted to globalize it. The first step was refining control over a key asset, LGT Group, a bank wholly owned by the princely family of Liechtenstein. Unlike most royal holdings, LGT wasn't ceremonial, it was fully operational, a real financial institution with clients across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. What made it different was its ownership structure. While British royals rely on public funds and state-managed estates, Hans Adam's family owns the bank outright. No shareholders, no public filings, just royal control. LGT began as a regional bank, but quickly evolved into a magnet for the ultra-wealthy. It offered more than just accounts. It offered privacy, asset protection, and legacy planning. In a financial world increasingly skeptical of offshore secrecy, LGT stood as one of the few institutions still offering discreet services backed by an actual monarchy. Key to this transformation were Liechtenstein's banking secrecy laws, which for decades rivaled those of Switzerland. While global institutions moved towards transparency, Hans Adam made sure his country retained just enough privacy to stay competitive. The legal framework allowed for anonymous trust, lower taxes, and minimal disclosure, drawing in billionaires, old money families, and companies seeking safe harbor. By the early 2000s, Liechtenstein was managing tens of billions in global assets, much of it flowing through foundations and corporate structures tied to the royal family. These weren't hidden in the shadows. They were perfectly legal under Liechtenstein law, and LGT, under Hans Adam's guidance, became the crown jewel of the operation. Today, LGT manages over $300 billion in assets. Its clients include aristocrats, global CEOs, and discreet billionaires from regions where political stability is never guaranteed. Through this engine, the princely house has grown its wealth to an estimated $6 to $7 billion, making Hans Adam II wealthier than most tech giants, including Twitter founder Jack Dorsey and Airbnb's Brian Chesky. What makes this remarkable isn't just the scale, it's the silence. The fortune wasn't built with IPOs, flashy acquisitions, or celebrity headlines. It was slowly grown, protected by law, and managed with a kind of precision you don't see in traditional royalty. Hans Adam wasn't just trying to make history, he was building permanence. And while the money was growing, the family made sure the road wasn't watching too closely. Most billionaires end up in headlines whether they like it or not, be it for buying super yachts, getting sued, or tweeting themselves into chaos. But the House of Liechtenstein, sitting on a multi-billion-dollar fortune, has managed to do the opposite. Stay rich and stay quiet. Unlike the British royal family, which operates under intense public scrutiny and publishes annual reports on everything from staff salaries to horse stables, the Liechtenstein royals reveal almost nothing. There are no stock listings, no public earning disclosures, and very few interviews. Most people wouldn't recognize Prince Hans Adam II on the street, let alone know that his family controls an empire more tightly guarded than many hedge funds. The key to that secrecy lies in structures like the Princely House Foundation and the LGT Foundation. These aren't ordinary family offices or charities. They are fortified legal entities designed to shield ownership, distribute wealth privately, and bypass public visibility. Through them, assets like castles, forests, real estate, art collections, and even corporate shares can be controlled without appearing on any billionaire list or official registry. The Princely House Foundation, for example, holds cultural properties, endowments, and traditional lands, but its governance rules keep those holdings legally separated from individual family members, meaning Hans Adam doesn't technically own the estate, even though he has complete authority over it. That distinction helps avoid estate taxes, inheritance scrutiny, and any legal claims against personal wealth. The LGT Foundation plays a similar role in this financial realm, overseeing the family's full ownership of LGT Group. Unlike other banks with layers of investors and regulatory disclosure, LGT's top-level ownership never leaves the Liechtenstein family's grip, and its internal operations remain out of the public eye. That makes it one of the most discreet banking empires in the world, and one of the few that is still entirely royal-controlled. Compare that to King Felipe VI of Spain, who is required to publish public income reports and maintain full transparency over the royal household spending, or the Windsors, whose holdings like the Crown Estate are technically held in trust for the nation, with only personal properties like Balmoral and Sandringham falling under private ownership. Even Monaco's royal assets, though protected, are regularly profiled by the press due to their high-profile lifestyle. Liechtenstein's strength is the absence of spectacle. Their art collection, worth hundreds of millions, is rarely loaned. Their properties aren't used for flashy events. Their financial statements are private. No reality shows, no leaks, no scandals. Hans Adam knew that true wealth isn't just built, it's protected from being seen. Through dense legal frameworks, foundations, and cultural quiet, the princely family created one of Europe's most impenetrable royal fortresses, not made of stone but of discretion. But financial secrecy was only one part of the plan. The other was political power, and Hans Adam refused to let go of that too. In most of Europe, royalty is something you wave at from a parade route. Crowned heads in tailored suits, shaking hands, cutting ribbons, offering speeches but never orders. But in Liechtenstein, Hans Adam II didn't just wear the crown, he rewrote the rules it rested on. In 2003, while most monarchs were scaling back, Hans Adam asked his people for more power. Through a national referendum, he proposed sweeping constitutional changes that would give the prince the legal right to veto any law, dissolve parliament, appoint judges, and even dismiss the entire government. Critics, including international human rights groups, warned that it would turn Liechtenstein into a monarchy in name and function. But Hans Adam didn't back down. He addressed the nation directly and told them if they didn't want him, he'd leave and take the family fortune with him. The result, the people voted yes. It wasn't close. Nearly 64% of Liechtenstein's voters supported the proposal, voluntarily handing their prince more authority than any other monarch in Europe still holds. And in a twist that confounded political scientists and Democrats alike, citizens didn't see it as a step back, they saw it as stability. Hans Adam had made Liechtenstein rich, safe, and globally respected, so they handed him the keys. Unlike ceremonial monarchs, Hans Adam exercises real active political power. He's not just consulted, he can override. He can shut down legislation he disagrees with. He can fire the prime minister. He can even block referendums. And though he formally handed over day-to-day responsibilities to his son Prince Alois in 2004, those powers remain untouched in the constitution. There is no equivalent elsewhere in Europe. The Windsors in the UK are constitutional figureheads. The Dutch monarchy has no real say in governance. Even Vatican City, ruled by the Pope, doesn't function with the direct political veto power Hans Adam holds. Liechtenstein isn't just a microstate, it's a micro-monarchy, engineered with one central truth. The prince governs because the people let him, and because he made it profitable to do so. But the true genius wasn't just controlling a country, it was turning it into a magnet for other people's money. In a world obsessed with wealth, Liechtenstein didn't just watch from the sidelines, it offered the locker room keys. While other countries debated tax reform and transparency, this Alpine principality quietly became one of the most trusted vaults for the world's elite. And at the center of it all was not a regulator, but a royal Hans Adam II. It didn't happen overnight. For decades, Liechtenstein was Europe's financial best-kept secret, a country with more foundations than citizens, and banking laws so opaque, they made Switzerland look nosy. But what made Liechtenstein exceptional wasn't just secrecy, it was stability, political calm, low taxes, and critically, a monarchy that guaranteed discretion from the very top. Russian oligarchs looking to diversify beyond Cyprus and London quietly filtered wealth through Liechtenstein's trust networks. Middle Eastern royals, seeking stability away from regional turbulence, moved large family holdings into Liechtenstein's banks under the layers of confidentiality. Even Swiss corporations, frustrated with growing international pressure, used Liechtenstein to structure subsidiaries and reduce tax exposure. In 2000, the OECD blacklisted Liechtenstein as one of the world's most non-cooperative tax havens. The US and Germany ramped up on pressure. International banks pulled out. For a moment, it looked like the game was up, but Hans Adam played it differently. Instead of retreating, Liechtenstein rebranded. They rewrote tax laws, signed international agreements, and established compliance protocols. They cooperated just enough. Liechtenstein was removed from the blacklist, polished its image, and kept doing business. The country remained a magnet for the ultra-wealthy, but now with a sheen of legitimacy. The transformation was surgical. The trust industry remained intact, but now clients had clearer paperwork. The princely house kept its grip, but international investors felt reassured, and the crown jewel LGT Group grew into a global asset manager with a reach far beyond Europe. It now controls more than $300 billion in assets, making it the world's largest family-owned private banking group. LGT opened offices in Singapore, Dubai, and Hong Kong, catering to new generations of wealth from Asia and the Gulf. Its clientele included discreet millionaires, generational dynasties, and politically exposed persons who needed their money to move quietly, legally, and invisibly. Through a blend of conservative investment strategies and unmatched discretion, Liechtenstein became the bank for the people who didn't want to be on Forbes' list. And unlike Monaco or the Cayman Islands, Liechtenstein offered something rare: sovereign continuity. The prince wasn't changing with election cycles, he wasn't subject to populist backlash, his rule was stable, and his country small enough to protect, yet globally connected enough to matter. That combination, royal stability, legal opacity, and financial scale, turned Liechtenstein into something almost mythical. A modern kingdom where money could disappear in plain sight, and where trust was quite literally a business model. But even kings aren't immune to scandal. And when the spotlight finally came, the royal silence began to crack. For years, Liechtenstein thrived in the shadows of the global economy. But in 2008, the spotlight arrived, uninvited. A former employee at LGT Bank leaked client data to German tax authorities, igniting a firestorm across Europe. The revelations exposed how the world's elite were using Liechtenstein's tight-lipped institutions to hide billions in untaxed wealth. It wasn't just shady businessmen, it included politicians, CEOs, and public figures. What had once been dismissed as a rumor now sat in courtrooms as evidence. Germany called for reform, the EU increased pressure. The United States, already battling tax evasion in offshore jurisdictions, added Liechtenstein to its list of tax havens under scrutiny. Suddenly, the serene Alpine monarchy was under the same microscope as Panama or the Cayman Islands, and the crown could no longer stay silent. In the midst of this turbulence, Hans Adam II stepped back. In 2004, he had already transferred day-to-day political power to his son. Although he retained formal authority as head of state, the move wasn't a retreat, it was a calculation. Hans Adam remained the patriarch, but Alois, educated in Salzburg and London, became the new face of the monarchy. Where Hans Adam was stoic and traditional, Alois was softer, more modern, and fluent in language of diplomacy. He introduced modest legal reforms, expanded international cooperations, and reassured the EU that Liechtenstein was no longer a rogue tax shelter. But he never dismantled the system, he just cleaned the windows. Even as Liechtenstein signed new tax transparency agreements and open limited information sharing protocols, the foundation, trust, and the bank structures stayed intact. The architecture of secrecy didn't disappear, it adapted. Alois prevented the family's grip on LGT Group and the country's legal flexibility while maintaining Liechtenstein's status as a trusted refuge for legitimate wealth. But that balancing act hasn't been without friction. In 2012, a new wave of EU scrutiny once again turned its eyes on microstates. Liechtenstein, Monaco, and Andorra were urged to increase transparency or risk reputational damage. Inside Liechtenstein, some younger citizens questioned whether monarchy and modern democracy could coexist indefinitely. Yet, in a 2012 referendum, when asked when Prince Alois should retain his veto power over national decisions, a majority of voters said yes. There are tensions between privacy and accountability, tradition and reform, monarchy and democracy. But so far, the Liechtenstein model has held. The monarchy continues to stare from behind closed doors. Its assets guarded by foundations, its influence preserved by law, and its mystique intact. The scandals made headlines, but they didn't break the system. They simply showed how resilient and deeply embedded it had become. In a world where institutions crumble under pressure, Liechtenstein didn't panic. It refined the silence. So while the world chases tech billionaires and crypto kings, one royal has stayed richer, quieter, and firmly in control. Should one man really control a country, a fortune, and a bank? Or is that exactly what royalty has always meant to be? Leave your thoughts in the comments.